The closet door was open just a crack, barely enough to notice if you weren't paying attention. But I was. It had been closed when I left for work this morning. Emily always kept it shut because she hated the way the door didn't align perfectly with the frame. So it made the room look messy. So when I walked into the bedroom and saw it slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking out from inside, I stopped cold. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because you know something isn't right, like the air itself is holding its breath. For a second, I considered that maybe Emily had just left in a hurry and forgot. But that thought disappeared the moment I noticed something else, her perfume. It was strong, too strong, like she had sprayed it recently, but the scent was off. It wasn't the usual floral kind she wore. It was musky, heavier, and it clung to the air like an accusation. My stomach tightened, my pulse picking up as I stepped closer to the closet. The floor creaked beneath me, and in that instant, I swore I heard something, a shift, the faintest sound of fabric brushing against wood. I reached out, fingers hovering over the handle, and that's when I saw it. The edge of a shoe, barely visible in the shadows between hanging dresses. A man's shoe, black leather, polished, and way too big to belong to Emily. My breath caught in my throat. Every logical thought in my brain screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to walk out of the room and pretend I hadn't seen it. But my hand was already gripping the door. I yanked it open. A man stood there, frozen, his back pressed against the wall like a trapped animal. He wasn't some stranger, some faceless intruder. No, that would have been easier. That would have made sense. This was Ryan, my best friend, the guy who stood next to me in my wedding, who held my shoulder and told me how lucky I was to have Emily. He was standing in my closet, half-dressed, wearing a panicked expression like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. I didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even breathe for a second. I just stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation, something that would make this anything other than what it obviously was. Ryan swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing like he was choking on his own guilt. Man, I can. The sentence didn't even finish before my fist collided with his jaw. Ryan's head snapped to the side as he stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of Emily's shoeboxes. The thud of his body hitting the floor was dull, barely satisfying compared to the way my knuckles burned from the impact. He groaned, rolling onto his side, gripping his face like he could somehow press the pain away. I stepped closer, towering over him as he scrambled to push himself up, eyes darting to the doorway like he was already planning his escape. "Start talking," I said, my voice lower than I expected, my breath coming in sharp bursts. I could feel my own heartbeat in my ears, a steady, pounding reminder that this was real, that this was actually happening. Ryan wiped at his mouth, checking for blood, though I didn't care if there was any. He hesitated for half a second too long, and that pissed me off even more. "Say something," I demanded, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. He started, shaking his head like he was still trying to process how we had gotten to this moment. "It's not." "Not what?" I cut him off, taking another step forward, forcing him to look up at me. "Not what it looks like. You're half-dressed, hiding in my closet. What the hell else could this be?" Before he could answer, another sound broke through the room. Footsteps. Emily. I turned toward the bedroom door just as she appeared, stopping dead in her tracks when she saw Ryan on the floor, her face going pale. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I didn't give her the chance to collect herself. "Go on, Emily," I said, gesturing toward the mess in front of me. "Explain this." Her mouth opened and closed, her hands gripping the bottom of her shirt like she needed something to hold on to. Her gaze flickered between me and Ryan, as if trying to gauge just how much damage had already been done. She was taking too long. "Say it," I pressed, my patience running out. It's not what you think," she finally said, the same pathetic excuse Ryan had tried. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "You're both really going with that? That's the best you've got." She took a step forward, eyes pleading. Just let me explain." Ryan had pulled himself up by now, leaning against the wall like he needed it to stay upright. His shirt was still unbuttoned, his belt undone, and he had the nerve to wipe his mouth again, still looking for blood. "How long?" I asked, cutting through Emily's pathetic attempt at damage control. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I felt my stomach tighten, my throat constrict. How long, Emily? My voice was louder this time, more forceful. She winced, closing her eyes for a brief second before answering. A few months. My head dropped for a second as I let those words sink in. Months. Not days, not weeks, months. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, and when I looked at him, he had the nerve to look guilty, like that made any of this better. And what? I continued, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought you could just keep sneaking around behind my back like I'm some idiot? Emily shook her head quickly. It wasn't like that. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. Really? Then how was it? She bit her lip, glancing at Ryan as if expecting him to help her out of this. But he stayed silent, probably realizing there was no saving this. I don't know, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. It just happened. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The audacity, the sheer unbelievable audacity to stand here in my bedroom, in our home, with my best friend half-dressed in my closet, and tell me that it just happened. Like she had tripped and fallen into his arms. You don't know, I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. You don't know. She shook her head quickly, but I wasn't done. You made a choice, I said, stepping closer. Every single time, you made a choice. Don't stand there and act like this was some accident. Ryan finally found his voice, stepping forward slightly. Man, I swear I never meant for this to happen. I turned to him so fast he actually flinched. And yet, here we are, I shot back. You didn't mean for this to happen, but you still showed up. You still took your shirt off. You still hid in my closet. He had no response to that. He just looked away, jaw clenched. I exhaled, forcing myself to step back. The urge to hit him again was strong, but I wasn't about to waste more energy on him. I turned back to Emily, who was still standing there, her hands shaking slightly. You had every opportunity to stop this, I said, my voice quieter now. Every single time, you could have chosen me. But you didn't. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. She started, but I cut her off with a shake of my head. I don't want to hear it, I said, already walking toward the bedroom door. You don't get to cry. You don't get to act like you're the victim. She took a step after me. Please just don't. I interrupted, my hand already on the doorknob. Just don't. I walked out, leaving her standing there in the ruins of everything she had destroyed. I walked out of the bedroom and straight into the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as I tried to process everything. My hands were still shaking, whether from anger or adrenaline. I didn't know and I didn't care. I wanted to break something, to throw a chair through the window, or punch another hole in Ryan's face. But I forced myself to breathe. The sound of footsteps behind me made my teeth clench. I didn't turn around. Please, just listen to me. Emily's voice was shaking, but I didn't give a damn how upset she was. I turned slowly, my eyes locking onto hers, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger, someone who had been living in my home, sleeping in my bed, pretending to love me while sneaking around behind my back with the one person I had trusted more than anyone else. Give me one good reason why I should listen to anything you have to say, I said, my voice calm in a way that made her flinch. She took a step closer, hesitated, then folded her arms across her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. Because I didn't want this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed, shaking my head. You didn't want this to happen? That's rich. You've been screwing him for months, Emily. Don't stand here and act like you just tripped and landed in bed with him. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel anything. Not pity, not sadness, just a deep, burning anger that settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I know I messed up, she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. I know that, but you have to believe me when I say I still love you. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she actually believed the words coming out of her mouth or if she was just desperate to do damage control. You love me, I repeated, watching her nod quickly. That's funny, because women who love their husbands don't spread their legs for their husband's best friend. She winced like I had slapped her, but I wasn't done. You made a joke out of me, I continued, my voice low. You turned our marriage into a goddamn joke. And you did it with Ryan. Ryan, the guy who's been in my life for 15 years. The guy who was supposed to be like a brother to me. I know, she whispered, looking down. You don't know a damn thing, I snapped, taking a step forward. Because if you did, you would have thought about what this would do to me before you spread your legs for him. Her lip trembled, and she wiped at her face like she thought I actually cared that she was crying. She could cry all she wanted, but there was no coming back from this. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I let out a breath, shaking my head. You don't. Her shoulders shook, and she covered her mouth with her hands. I didn't care. I had nothing left to say to her, nothing left to give. She had taken everything and stomped on it like it meant nothing, and now she wanted to cry and beg for forgiveness like it would change anything. The sound of movement behind me made me tense up. I turned my head slightly to see Ryan standing in the hallway, his hands in the air like he thought I was about to take another swing at him. Look, man, he started, his voice uneven. I know I screwed up, okay? I know there's nothing I can say that's going to make this right, but you should stop talking, I interrupted, turning to face him fully. Because every word out of your mouth is just making me want to knock your teeth out. He swallowed, nodding slightly. I get it. No, you don't, I said. If you got it, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Emily let out a shaky breath, stepping between us. Please, let's just talk about this. Can we go sit down? Just for a second. I let my gaze flick between her and Ryan. Then I took a step back. There's nothing to talk about, I said, turning toward the front door. Wait. Emily rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Where are you going? I yanked my arm free from her grip, my jaw clenching. Anywhere but here. She shook her head rapidly, fresh tears falling down her face. Please, just don't leave like this. Can we at least try to talk? I laughed again, but there was nothing funny about this. You want to talk? Now. After months of sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, screwing him in my house, you suddenly want to talk? She wiped at her face, nodding quickly. Yes, because I can't lose you like this. I can't just let you walk out the door without trying to fix this. I stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled. You lost me the second you let him touch you. She let out a quiet sob, shaking her head again like she could somehow change what had already happened. I turned and walked to the door, pulling it open and stepping outside. She didn't try to stop me this time, but as I stepped onto the porch, I heard her whisper behind me. I'm sorry. I stopped for half a second, but I didn't turn around. Yeah, I muttered, stepping off the porch. So am I. I walked away, leaving her standing there with the ruins of what she had destroyed. The night air felt colder than it should have as I walked down the street, each step heavier than the last. My hands were still shaking, and no matter how many deep breaths I took, the pressure in my chest wouldn't ease. I had walked out without my wallet, without my keys, without anything except the clothes on my back, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I just needed to get away from that house, from them, from the smell of Emily's perfume still clinging to my skin like an infection I couldn't wash off. The street was quiet, empty, the occasional porch light flickering as I passed by houses where people were living their normal, betrayal-free lives. My feet carried me forward with no real destination, but my mind wasn't blank. It was a storm of images. Emily's panicked face, Ryan's pathetic excuses, the closet door cracking open to reveal the proof that my life had been nothing but a goddamn lie. The sound of a car approaching from behind made me tense, and for a second, I thought it was Emily coming after me. But as the vehicle slowed down next to me, I saw it was Jason, my neighbor from 2 houses down. His truck rolled to a stop, the passenger window sliding down as he leaned over, his expression unreadable. You good, man? He asked, his voice cautious. I stopped walking, but didn't answer right away. Jason and I weren't exactly close, but we had shared enough beers at backyard barbecues over the years that he knew me well enough to see something was off. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling sharply. No, I admitted, my voice rough. Not really. Jason studied me for a moment, then reached over and popped the door open. Get in. I hesitated for half a second, then climbed into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut behind me. Jason didn't ask any questions right away, just pulled back onto the road and drove. The silence between us stretched for a couple of minutes before he finally spoke. You want to tell me what's going on? Or you just need to sit in silence for a while? I stared out the windshield, my jaw tightening before I answered. I just found Ryan hiding in my closet. Jason didn't react at first, just kept his hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road, but I saw the way his fingers curled a little tighter. He wasn't an idiot. He knew exactly what I meant. Shit, he muttered after a long pause. Emily, I nodded, my throat tightening. He let out a breath, shaking his head. Man, I don't even know what to say. Nothing to say. I replied, my voice hollow. It happened. I walked in, found them, punched Ryan in the face, then left. Jason gave a short, humorless chuckle. Well, at least you got one hit in. Should have been more. He didn't argue with that. The truck slowed as we pulled into a gas station parking lot, the neon glow of the signs casting a dull light over everything. Jason parked and turned off the engine, then reached behind his seat and grabbed a six-pack of beer, tearing it open and handing me one. Figured you might need this, he said. I took it without a word, cracking the can open and taking a long drink. The cold rushed down my throat, didn't do much to numb the rage still burning in my gut, but it was something. Jason leaned back against his seat, drinking his own beer in silence before finally speaking again. You staying with someone tonight? I shook my head. Didn't exactly think that far ahead. You can crash at my place, he offered. Got a spare room. No offense, but you don't look like you should be making decisions right now. I let out a breath, nodding slightly. Appreciate it. Jason didn't press for more, didn't try to offer useless words of comfort. He just sat there, drinking his beer, letting me sit in the mess of my own thoughts without trying to clean it up for me. That was good because nothing was going to fix this. Emily had made sure of that. After finishing my beer, I ran a hand through my hair, my mind going back to that moment when I had stood in the bedroom, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this hurt less. But there was nothing. No explanation. No excuse that would change what had happened. I thought about what was waiting for me back at the house, about the look on her face when I left. Part of me wanted to go back just to scream at her some more, to make her feel an ounce of the pain that was ripping through me, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. Jason seemed to read my thoughts because he sighed and spoke again. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. I turned my head toward him, narrowing my eyes. What do you think I'm planning? I don't know, he admitted, taking another sip of his beer. But I know that look, and nothing good ever comes from it. I didn't answer because maybe he was right. I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know what came next. All I knew was that I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just going to end with me walking away while they got to sit in that house and pretend everything would blow over. Ryan was my best friend. Emily was my wife. They had made a choice over and over again to betray me. And I wasn't the kind of man who let things like that slide. Jason let out another sigh, tossing his empty beer can into the back seat. You want to head back to my place? I stared out at the parking lot for a long moment before finally nodding. Yeah. He started the truck, pulling out onto the road. And as we drove, I made a decision. This wasn't over. Not yet. The guest room at Jason's place was small, just a bed and a dresser, but it was quiet. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the last few hours over and over again. No matter how much I tried to push it away, the image of Ryan standing in my closet wouldn't leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him there, shirt half-buttoned, face frozen in shock like he never thought he'd get caught. I felt my jaw clench just thinking about it, the urge to hit him again making my hands twitch. But it wasn't just him. It was Emily too. The way she looked at me like I was the problem, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. The way she had the audacity to cry, as if she had any right to be the one hurting. I had given her everything. I had trusted her, and she had thrown it all away for the one person who was supposed to have my back. I turned onto my side, staring at the darkened window. Sleep wasn't going to come, not tonight. The anger was too fresh, too raw, and there was no way I could just close my eyes and pretend it didn't exist. My body was exhausted, but my mind was still running at full speed, refusing to let this go. I needed to do something. Sitting in the dark, feeling sorry for myself, wasn't going to cut it. I pushed myself up, rubbing a hand over my face before swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Jason's house was quiet. the only sound coming from the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I walked down the hall, my footsteps barely making a sound against the hardwood floor. When I reached the living room, Jason was still awake, sitting on the couch with a beer in his hand, flipping through channels without really watching anything. He looked up when he saw me, raising an eyebrow. "Knew you weren't going to sleep," he said, setting the remote down. "Too much in my head," I admitted, dropping onto the chair across from him. Jason took a sip of his beer, watching me carefully. "So what's the plan?" I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. "I don't know yet." "Bullshit," he said immediately, leaning forward. "I can see it all over your face. You're thinking about something." I looked at him, debating whether or not I should say it out loud. But Jason wasn't stupid. He already knew. I leaned back, crossing my arms over my chest. "I'm not just going to let this go." Jason let out a breath, nodding like he expected that answer. "All right, so what are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away because I didn't know the full answer myself. All I knew was that I wasn't walking away from this without making them feel even a fraction of the betrayal they had dumped on me. Emily and Ryan had spent months treating me like a joke, sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, and expecting me to just keep being the same idiot who didn't see it. That ended tonight. "I want them to pay," I said finally, my voice steady. "Both of them." Jason nodded slowly, setting his beer down on the table. "You thinking divorce?" "Obviously. You thinking about something else?" I met his eyes, and for the first time since this started, I felt a flicker of something other than anger. A sense of control. "Yeah." Jason didn't try to talk me out of it. He just sat there, waiting for me to lay it out. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "She thinks she can cry her way out of this," I said. "That she can play the victim and make me feel guilty for leaving. I'm not giving her that." Jason tilted his head. "Meaning, I'm going to let her sit in that house and wonder what's coming next. I'm not going back. Not yet. I want her to wake up tomorrow, check her phone, and realize I haven't called. I want her to spend the whole day looking over her shoulder, waiting for the moment I finally react." Jason let out a low whistle. "That's cold. She deserves worse." No argument here. I leaned back, rubbing my hands together. "And Ryan, I'm not letting him walk away from this with nothing." Jason studied me for a second. "You got something on him?" I nodded. "More than he realizes. He's got a lot to lose. His job, his reputation. And I'm going to make sure he loses it." Jason didn't ask how, and I appreciated that. Instead, he picked up his beer again, taking a slow sip before speaking. "So what do you need from me?" I exhaled, thinking it over. "A place to stay for a couple more nights, if that's all right." "Done. And maybe a favor." Jason smirked. "Now we're getting somewhere." I looked him in the eye. "Ryan's got a lot of skeletons. I just need to pull the right one out." Jason's smirk widened slightly. "Now that I can help with." The next morning, I sat at Jason's kitchen table, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, but I didn't complain. My mind was too occupied with what needed to be done. I had no messages from Emily, no calls, nothing from Ryan either. That didn't surprise me. Emily was probably still in shock, pacing around the house, rehearsing whatever bullshit excuse she planned to give me once I finally picked up the phone. Ryan, on the other hand, was smart enough to know there was nothing he could say to fix this. He was probably hoping I'd just disappear, cool down, and maybe in a few weeks he could crawl back into my life with some half-assed apology. That wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to cool down, and I sure as hell wasn't going to disappear. Jason sat across from me, scrolling through his phone, his expression unreadable. He had barely spoken all morning, just handed me the coffee and let me sit there, sorting through my own thoughts. When he finally did speak, it was without looking up. "I did some digging," he said, his thumb flicking across the screen. "Ryan's been screwing around for a while." That caught my attention. I set my mug down, leaning forward. "What do you mean?" Jason turned the phone around, showing me a screen full of messages. "A buddy of mine works at a bar across town. Says Ryan's been a regular for the past year, always with different women. Never the same one twice, except for Emily." I clenched my jaw, taking the phone and scanning through the screenshots. Texts exchanged between bartenders, notes about Ryan leaving with random women, receipts with timestamps that didn't match the story he had always told me about being home or busy with work. He hadn't just betrayed me with Emily. He had been doing this to other people too, probably cheating on whoever he was dating before this mess started. Jason leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Figured you'd want to know just what kind of guy he really is. I nodded slowly, my mind working through the possibilities. If he's been screwing around that much, then there's a chance he's got something to lose. Probably, Jason agreed. Most guys like that don't think ahead. They assume they'll never get caught. I tapped my fingers against the table, thinking, I need more. Jason smirked slightly. I figured you'd say that. That's why I already made a call. Before I could ask what he meant, there was a knock at the door. Jason stood up, walking over and opening it. A woman stepped inside, her sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on me. She was tall, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair tied back and a confidence that made it clear she didn't waste time. Jason motioned toward me. This is Lauren, he said. She's a private investigator. Helped me out with a situation a few years ago. I looked at her, not sure what to expect. And you think she can help me? Lauren crossed her arms, giving me a once-over. Depends on what you need. I glanced at Jason, then back at her. I need proof that Ryan's been screwing around outside of Emily. Something solid. Something I can use. She raised an eyebrow. Use for what? I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure how much I wanted to say. But Jason had vouched for her, and right now, I needed every advantage I could get. I want to ruin him, I said finally. Lauren studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I can work with that. Jason walked over, grabbing another coffee mug and handing it to her. He's looking for dirt on a guy who's been screwing his wife. Lauren smirked. That's a story I hear a lot more than you'd think. She took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down. If this guy's been running around that much, he's left a trail. I just need to know where to start looking. Jason passed her the phone with the messages his friend had sent. She scrolled through them, nodding to herself. This is a good start. If he's been going to the same places often, then someone there knows more. Bartenders talk, hotel staff notice things. Give me a couple of days, and I'll find something worth using. I exhaled, feeling the first real sense of progress since this whole nightmare started. Good. Lauren tucked her phone away, finishing her coffee in one long sip before standing up. I'll be in touch. She left without another word, and Jason sat back down, watching me carefully. You sure you want to go down this road? I met his eyes. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Jason nodded, not arguing. Then let's get to work. Lauren worked fast. By the next evening, she had already gathered more than enough to prove that Ryan was exactly the kind of man I had started to suspect he was. She showed up at Jason's place with a folder thick with printed messages, photos, and a list of names, women Ryan had been with, some of them more than once, some of them clearly thinking they were the only ones. The proof was undeniable. Hotel receipts, screenshots of conversations, even a few social media messages from women who had started to suspect they weren't the only ones in his life. Lauren sat across from me at Jason's kitchen table, flipping through the pages, her tone professional, her expression unreadable. This guy isn't just a cheater, she said, tapping one of the pages. He's a habitual liar. He's been balancing multiple women at once, and I'd bet money that he's made more promises than he can keep. Some of these women thought they were in actual relationships with him. I took the folder, flipping through the pages myself, feeling the anger settle deeper in my chest. It wasn't just about Emily anymore. Ryan had spent years lying to everyone around him, playing the part of a trustworthy friend, a decent guy, while sneaking around with whoever would give him attention. And Emily, like an idiot, had fallen for it, probably thinking she was special. She wasn't. She was just another name on his list. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed as he watched me read. So what's the plan? I exhaled slowly, setting the folder down. I want him to lose everything. Lauren nodded like she expected that answer. The good news is, you don't even have to do much. Guys like him, they destroy themselves. You just have to give them a little push. I looked up at her. And what kind of push are we talking about? She smirked slightly, pulling out her phone. These women, they don't know about each other. Not yet. But if they did, let's just say things could get messy for Ryan real quick. Jason chuckled under his breath. I like where this is going. Lauren scrolled through her phone, showing me a list of contacts. I already reached out to one of them. She was real interested in hearing about the others. If we send this info to all of them, let them connect the dots themselves, Ryan won't just have one angry woman to deal with. He'll have a whole line of them, all at once. I stared at the screen, thinking about it. It was almost too easy. I had spent the last few days drowning in rage, thinking about how to make him pay, and here was the answer sitting right in front of me. Ryan had built this himself. I was just giving a little nudge. Send it, I said. Lauren nodded without hesitation, fingers moving quickly over her phone as she sent out the messages. Within minutes, the first few women had already started responding. Some were in disbelief. Some were furious. Some immediately started demanding proof, which Lauren was happy to provide. Jason leaned over, watching the screen with amusement. "This is going to be a disaster," he muttered. "For him," I corrected. Lauren glanced up. "You want me to keep you updated?" I shook my head. "I don't care about the details. I just want to know when it blows up in his face." Jason stood up, stretching. "That's not going to take long." He wasn't wrong. Less than an hour later, Lauren's phone started lighting up with notifications. Screenshots of messages Ryan was getting from angry women, posts starting to pop up on social media. Vague at first, but growing bolder as more women realized they weren't alone. His name was getting thrown around, accusations piling up. I didn't even need to do anything. The fire had already started. Lauren grinned as she scrolled through the updates. This guy's about to have the worst week of his life. Jason grabbed a beer from the fridge, tossing one to me. "So what about Emily?" I opened the bottle, taking a slow drink before answering. "She's next." By the next morning, Ryan's life was already unraveling. Social media was flooded with angry posts, screenshots of his messages being shared in group chats, and accusations stacking up in the comments. Women he had been juggling started talking to each other, comparing timelines, realizing they had all been fed the same lies. Some of them even started reaching out to his workplace, making sure his reputation wasn't just ruined in his personal life, but professionally as well. I didn't need to reach out to him myself, because he was already drowning, desperately trying to put out fires that were spreading faster than he could handle. That part of my plan was done. Now it was Emily's turn. Jason sat across from me at the kitchen table. Eating a sandwich like this was just another normal day, scrolling through his phone with mild amusement as he checked the latest updates on Ryan's downfall. Lauren had already moved on to another case, but she made sure to send me the most important updates before heading out. Jason smirked as he read a new message. Looks like one of Ryan's coworkers just saw the posts. Said his boss already called him in for a conversation. I nodded, not surprised. He's not talking his way out of this one. Jason set his phone down, wiping his hands on a napkin. "So, what's the plan for Emily?" I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "She thinks I'm just hiding out, figuring out how to forgive her. I want her to keep thinking that, at least for another day." Jason raised an eyebrow. "You're going to make her sweat. She deserves worse," I said, setting the mug down. "But yeah, I want her to sit in that house, wondering if I'm coming back. I want her to feel that pressure, to realize she has no idea what I'm thinking." Jason nodded slowly, and then I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "Then I make sure she loses just as much as Ryan." Jason smirked. "I like where this is going." I spent the rest of the day preparing. Emily had no idea what I knew, and I planned to use that against her. I had already spoken to a lawyer, making sure I had everything in place before I made my next move. The house, the bank accounts, all of it. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without consequences. I had no intention of staying in that house with her any longer than necessary, but I was damn sure going to make sure she didn't get to keep it either. She had built a future with me, only to burn it down for a temporary thrill. Now, she was going to watch as everything she took for granted slipped through her fingers. That evening, I finally sent her a message. "We need to talk. I'll be home soon." She responded almost immediately. "Please, I just want to explain. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't answer. Let her sit with that. Let her stare at her phone, wondering what I was thinking, panicking over what I was about to do. It wasn't just about making her feel guilty. It was about making sure she knew she had lost. Jason watched as I set my phone down, shaking his head with a chuckle. "She's losing her mind right now." "Good," I said, finishing my drink. "Because this isn't even the worst part yet." I pulled into the driveway just after 8, letting the engine run for a moment before shutting it off. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the living room window, and I could already picture Emily sitting inside, pacing, checking her phone every few seconds, waiting for me to walk through the door. She had no idea what I was going to say or do, and that uncertainty was probably eating her alive. I stepped out of the car, locking it behind me, and walked up to the front door, pausing just long enough to take a breath before pushing it open. The moment I stepped inside, Emily appeared from the hallway, her eyes red and swollen, her hands clasped together like she had spent the whole day preparing for this conversation. "I didn't know if you were actually going to come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I closed the door behind me, slipping off my jacket and tossing onto the chair. "Neither did I." She took a small step forward, hesitating like she wasn't sure if she should get closer. "I've been losing my mind, waiting to talk to you. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you." I let her talk, watching her closely, waiting for the part where she tried to twist this into something salvageable. "It didn't take long. But I need you to understand," she continued, her voice shaking. "It wasn't about you. It was never about you. I never stopped loving you." I almost laughed at that, shaking my head as I stepped past her and into the living room. "You don't cheat on someone you love." She flinched like the words physically hurt. Emily stood there, waiting for me to say something, her breathing uneven like she was afraid of what was coming next. I sat down on the couch, leaning back as I studied her. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept, probably hadn't eaten much either. Good. She deserved worse. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she shifted uncomfortably, wringing her hands like that would somehow make the situation better. "You want to explain?" I finally said, my voice calm. "Go ahead." She exhaled shakily, stepping closer but stopping herself before she got too near. "I don't know where to start." I gestured toward the chair across from me. "Start with how long you've been lying to me." Emily hesitated, then sat down, pressing her palms against her knees. "It wasn't planned. I never woke up one day and decided to cheat. Don't say it just happened." I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "That's an excuse. You made choices, Emily. Every time you texted him, every time you met up, every time you snuck around, that was a choice." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. She had cried when I caught her too, and it hadn't stopped her from doing it. "You stopped looking at me the same way," she whispered. "You stopped making me feel wanted." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "So that's what this is? You wanted attention, so instead of talking to me, you spread your legs for my best friend?" She flinched at the harshness, but I didn't care. I wasn't here to make her feel better. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At first, it was just talking. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I repeated, nodding. "That much is obvious." She wiped at her face, looking down at her hands. "I was stupid. I know that. But I never wanted to lose you." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "You lost me the second you let him touch you." Emily swallowed hard, looking up at me, desperation in her eyes. "Is there any way we can fix this?" I tilted my head slightly, considering her for a moment. "No." She inhaled sharply, her whole body tensing like she had been holding on to some shred of hope that I wouldn't say that. But she should have known better. "I already spoke to a lawyer," I continued, watching the way her face paled. "I'll be filing for divorce." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me like she couldn't believe the words had actually come out of my mouth. Then she shook her head quickly. "No, wait. Please, we can go to counseling. We can—" "Stop." I cut her off, my voice firm. The closet door was open just a crack, barely enough to notice if you weren't paying attention. But I was. It had been closed when I left for work this morning. Emily always kept it shut because she hated the way the door didn't align perfectly with the frame. So it made the room look messy. So when I walked into the bedroom and saw it slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking out from inside, I stopped cold. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because you know something isn't right, like the air itself is holding its breath. For a second, I considered that maybe Emily had just left in a hurry and forgot. But that thought disappeared the moment I noticed something else, her perfume. It was strong, too strong, like she had sprayed it recently, but the scent was off. It wasn't the usual floral kind she wore. It was musky, heavier, and it clung to the air like an accusation. My stomach tightened, my pulse picking up as I stepped closer to the closet. The floor creaked beneath me, and in that instant, I swore I heard something, a shift, the faintest sound of fabric brushing against wood. I reached out, fingers hovering over the handle, and that's when I saw it. The edge of a shoe, barely visible in the shadows between hanging dresses. A man's shoe, black leather, polished, and way too big to belong to Emily.